Hello guys, today we are going to be introducing you to probability, which is going to be our last kind of unit for the year, which is super exciting. So today's just going to be super basic. It's going to be an introduction. It's going to be very vocabulary heavy. So hopefully that's a nice break after that 3D geometry test. Okay, so starting with kind of the big idea of what is probability. So probability is a word that you guys probably use like outside of the context of math, or at least a concept that you probably use outside the context of math. Like if you think there's a high chance of something happening versus a low chance of something happening. So that's the concept that is probability. So what probability is that it is a number, and that number has to be between 0 and 1. Okay, so we're talking right now like explicitly about fractions and decimals. Those are the numbers that are between 0 and 1. That represents how likely an event is to occur. So a probability of 0 meaning it's not going to happen, and a probability of 1 meaning it's definitely going to happen, and then the whole range of numbers in between there. Okay. If we were in class, we would do this stop and think, and we would have a conversation out loud. I'm just going to go ahead and put them up there, and we can kind of just brainstorm. So it says, with that in mind, what do you think a probability of 0 means? I kind of just told you that. It means that it's definitely not going to happen. So things like, I'm not going to grow wings and fly away. The probability of that is 0. And then a probability of 1 means it's definitely going to happen. So I'm going to go to sleep tonight. That's definitely going to happen at some point. And then a probability of 0.5 is right in the middle, right? 1/2 is right in the middle of 0 and 1. So that means really and truly that it could go either way. So that's that. All right, here are the vocabulary terms that we associate with different either ranges of probabilities or different specific probabilities depending. So if something has a probability of 1, right, that means that it is definitely going to happen. We would call that event certain, as in it is certainly going to occur. If something has a probability of 0, that means that it is definitely not going to happen. So we would call that impossible. That means there is no way that it is going to happen. Okay, so that is only things with a probability of 1 or 0, right? I'm not talking about, we don't say something is certain if there's a 99% chance of it. We say that it is most likely, but we don't say that it's certain unless we know 100% for sure it has to have a probability of 1. Okay, we say that things are likely if they have a probability of more than 1/2 or 0.5. We say that it's likely to occur. We say that things are unlikely to occur if they have a probability of less than 1/2 or 0.5. And then right in the middle, when you talk about that probability of 0.5 is a little bit weird. There's lots of different things that you can call it. You can call it as likely as not. You can call it neither likely or unlikely. And again, that only applies to that true probability of 50%. So we have certain is only 0. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Certain is only 1. Impossible is only 0. And then we have right in the middle, 50% is neither likely or unlikely. And then likely is a range, right? Likely is anywhere above 50, but smaller than 1. And unlikely is a range. It's anywhere less than 1/2 to 0. So kind of understanding the difference between each one of those terms and which ones talk about specific probabilities versus a range of probabilities. Okay, this is just another visual of what this kind of looks like. So we've got a spectrum here with that an impossible event has a probability of 0 on one end of the spectrum, all the way up to a certain event has a probability of 1 or 100% at the other end of the spectrum. We've got equally likely right in the middle at that probability of 1/2, and then this whole range is unlikely. Everything in between 0 and 1/2 is unlikely. And then everything in between 1/2 and 1 is certain. Or I'm sorry, likely. All right, so the first skill in the probability unit that you have to be able to do is when you're given a probability, you have to give that descriptor word. So you have to be able to take a probability and say that's impossible, that's unlikely, that's equally likely as unlikely, that's likely, or that's certain. So here's our first example. It says there's an 80% chance of rain tomorrow. Describe the likelihood that it will rain. So 80% falls in that range of it's bigger than 1/2, but it's not quite 1. So we would say that this is likely. That's the vocabulary term that you use for a probability of 80%, is that it's likely. Okay. Obviously, you guys aren't going to be trying these because we're not in class, but we'll read through it anyway. So it says the probability that you land a jump on a snowboard is 1/2. So again, that's right in the middle. It could truly go either way. So we would say, again, that weird middle probability. So you could either say equally likely or unlikely, neither likely or unlikely, equally as likely, something like that. All right, and then number 2, there's a 100% chance that the temperature will be less than 120 degrees tomorrow. So that 100%, that is absolutely going to happen. Again, that vocabulary term that we use is certain. So your answer for number 2 here would be certain. All right. You also have to go the other way. So sometimes they'll give you that descriptor word and you have to give an example or choose the correct probability that fits that descriptor word. So in this particular example, it says you are told that it is unlikely that Ms. Kupiak removes the skulls from her classroom. Give an example of a possible probability representing this situation. So unlikely is what we have to meet. We have to fall somewhere in that range of unlikely. So there's a whole bunch of right answers to this question as long as you choose a number that's in between 0 and 1/2, right? So that could be 1/4, 1/5, 1/6, like anything that falls in between 0, 0%, 0, and 50%, 0.5, 1/2. As long as you fall in that range there, you're good. Okay, and then the last thing that we're going to talk about today is probability notation, which just means how you write something. So probability notation looks like this right here. Okay, so there's a P and then parentheses, and then you would put the event in here that you're talking about the probability of. So we read this as the probability of event A, but we write it this way, and it's just basically like an abbreviation. Okay, so it says, example, find the probability of flipping a coin and it landing on heads. So again, that notation is that you put a capital P and then parentheses, and then the event that we're looking for is that we get heads when we flip the coin. So that's why it says heads inside the parentheses. And that probability would be 1/2 or 50%. So it says right here, 0.5.